Hi, and welcome back to Beyond the Label, a series dedicated to discussing all things, well, beyond the label. I am Chris Orr, and I am the Director of Sales Engineering at Siegel Scientific, the makers of BarTender software. Thanks everyone for sticking around. In previous episodes, we talked about the history of barcodes, what all of those bars mean, and how they convey information on the label. We also briefly touched on the hundreds of barcode types and hinted at more recent additions to the barcode world, QR codes. We've seen them everywhere, those big, square, black and white blocks that look like a Rorschach pattern. They really came into the world consciousness a few years ago during the pandemic when they became a way for people to retrieve and view restaurant menus without having to touch anything. But they have been around longer than that in various shapes and forms, as you can see here. Well, what are these things? Where did they come from, and how do they work? Introducing Masahiro Hara, who led the charge to develop the QR code at Denso Wave Incorporated. In the labeling world, a typical barcode is called a 1D code, or one direction or one dimension code, which is to say that it is read across. QR codes, while still considered barcodes, are considered 2D or two-dimensional. Not only are they read across, but also up and down. One of the issues with 1D codes is that they are limited to alphanumeric characters and are limited in the number or the amount of data that they can store. Corporations in Japan wanted to be able to encode kanji and kana characters in addition to alphanumeric ones and to store more information than was available in 1D codes. When you look at a typical QR code, you'll notice a couple of things about them. First is the presence of three square marks, which indicate the top and left side of the code. This allows scanners to immediately recognize the existence of the code, and when combined with the alignment pattern, the reader can immediately detect the orientation relative to the scanner itself, which allows it to scan the code very quickly regardless of which direction it is turned. The second, and honestly this is one that is probably impossible to detect, is the ratio of black to white areas of the marks themselves. They are a 1:1 to 3:1:1, which apparently after an extensive study of pictures and symbols on innumerable flyers, magazines, and boxes, is the least likely to be detected. The rest of the black and white dots, if you will, make up the actual data itself. I think I see the dragon from the old Atari adventure game in this pattern. Or maybe it's a duck. After 18 months of trial and error, they developed a code that could hold up to 7,000 characters, including kanji, and could be read up to 10 times faster than other codes. It was released in 1994, where, as you can see here, it was quickly adopted by the auto industry. Other industries that had traceability requirements, such as food and pharmaceuticals, followed suit. The amount of data that can be stored in these codes made it possible to encode far more information than a standard 1D code. One interesting bit of legalese. While Denso Wave retains the patent rights to the QR code, they do not exercise them. They wanted it to be used by as many people as possible. Still, outside of the aforementioned industry, there was no widespread adoption of the code until 2002 with the development of a particular piece of technology, mobile phones with a camera. Prior to this development, you needed a special scanner to read and interpret a QR code, which limited its usability outside of businesses. However, with nearly every person on the planet having a device in their pockets that could scan a QR code, the use cases became nearly limitless. Businesses could post QR codes everywhere, and curious people with a smartphone in their hands could scan them and get information about the business, download a coupon, get a menu, or become part of a loyalty program, whatever they wanted to do. QR codes could also be printed on almost any medium. Paper labels, obviously, flyers, and other printed materials. They have started showing up on all sorts of things. This can of beer. Remember, the three square marks tell the camera where the QR code begins and ends. So despite the blotchy pattern extending the length of the can, if I cover up the marks, the rest of those patterns are just that, random dots. But when the marks are available, my phone can see the code and read it. By the way, I did not drink this beer while putting this episode together. Probably my favorite is this shirt that I made just for this podcast. As long as the resolution of the printer is there and the material lends itself to it, then a QR code containing all sorts of cool stuff can be printed. Micro QR codes let people put the codes on even smaller items like computer chips or other tiny objects where real estate is at a premium, like this computer board. Notice that this one does not have the orientation marks that you saw in previous QR codes. Instead, it has two lines on the bottom and the left. This particular QR code is called a data matrix code. You can see the code gain space by using orientation lines rather than squares, and is quite suitable for small areas or tiny objects. Little known fact for you future Cliff Clavens, the data matrix code was developed in 1989, several years before the QR code, and they are the only 2D code approved by GS1 for regulated health care items, and have largely become the standard for anti-counterfeit measures, like the code used here by the Amazon Transparency Program. They are largely unreadable even with a mobile phone, unless you're using a special app. In this case, scanning this code with the Amazon app will show you that the item is authentic, as well as any other information that the manufacturer or reseller wants you to see. Since then, the QR code has continued to evolve. Frame QR codes, for example, allow for images to be embedded in the center of the code. Logos, emojis, pictures, etc. allow the label to convey more human-readable context about what the code might contain. Secret function-equipped QR codes, or SQRC, are designed so that they can only be read by special types of scanners to prevent someone with a smartphone from getting access to the contents of the code. It was a way for people to encode sensitive information on objects. And then there's the rectangular micro QR code, which basically allows you to display smaller bits of information in a thin strip on a label. It can hold up to 219 alphanumeric characters, 361 numeric, or 92 kanji characters. So there you have it, folks. More information about QR codes than you could shake a stick at. They are definitely here to stay, and as you can see, manufacturers and other companies are finding more and more creative ways to use them to get your attention and to get you to scan them, which is a great way to use this technology. However, not everyone is using QR codes to benefit humanity. In the next month's episode for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we will take a look at the darker side of QR codes and how they might be used to compromise your personal information or worse. Well, there you have it, folks. If you have any questions or ideas, please let us know what sort of topics you think we should be looking at. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for your time, and I hope you continue to stick around for the next episode of Beyond the Label.